In a remote and forgotten corner of the world lies the village of Everwood, a place cloaked in the shadows of ancient legends and dark folklore. This village, now abandoned and overgrown, is surrounded by an immense, foreboding forest known for its unnatural darkness and malevolent atmosphere. The trees are ancient and twisted, their gnarled branches stretching out like skeletal fingers, as if they have been warped by dark forces. The forest of Everwood has always been the subject of chilling tales. Locals spoke of an ominous presence that haunted the woods, a malevolent entity bound to a small, seemingly innocuous creature. Few dared to enter the forest, and those who did often returned with tales of inexplicable fear. It was said that the forest had a life of its own, and its paths shifted, creating a never-ending maze designed to trap the unwary. Thomas, a daring and curious explorer, was captivated by these macabre stories. His fascination with the mysterious and the supernatural led him to Everwood. Armed with a flashlight, a weathered map, and a notebook, Thomas set out one crisp autumn evening. Excitement and apprehension mingled as he entered the forest, eager to uncover the truth behind the legends. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The twilight that had illuminated his path quickly faded, replaced by an encroaching darkness that seemed to seep from the ground itself. The trees loomed overhead, their thick canopies blocking out the last rays of sunlight. An oppressive silence enveloped him, broken only by the distant calls of nocturnal creatures and the rustling of unseen entities. Thomas's flashlight flickered and struggled against the growing darkness. Shadows danced and shifted, playing tricks on his mind. It felt as though the forest itself was watching him, its branches bending and warping in the corners of his vision. Despite his determination, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that he was being guided by an unseen force. Hours passed, and Thomas found himself increasingly disoriented. The forest paths that had seemed clear now twisted and changed, creating an ever-shifting labyrinth. The oppressive darkness grew thicker, and the air turned icy cold, making each breath visible as a ghostly mist. Just when his hope was fading, Thomas stumbled into a small clearing. At its center stood a small, donkey-like creature. This was no ordinary animal, it was smaller and its fur was matted, but it was the eyes that were truly unsettling. They glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, casting a ghostly glow around the creature. The light was not simply illuminating, it radiated a hypnotic energy that seemed to pull Thomas closer. The donkey stood motionless, its gaze fixed on Thomas with an intensity that made his skin crawl. It felt as though the creature was not just observing him but communicating with him in a dark, unspoken way. Compelled by a mix of fear and fascination, Thomas approached the donkey. The creature turned and began to walk away from the clearing, its glowing eyes locked onto Thomas. The forest seemed to shift around him, the trees bending and twisting as if guiding him along. With every step, the feeling of dread intensified. The darkness seemed to grow thicker, and the air became even colder. The donkey led Thomas to a dilapidated cabin, hidden among the overgrown trees. The cabin was a relic of a bygone era, its structure sagging under the weight of neglect. The roof was caved in, and the windows were shattered, leaving dark, hollow eyes that seemed to watch Thomas as he approached. The donkey stopped at the cabin's threshold and turned to face him, its glowing eyes casting a ghostly light over the crumbling structure. Thomas hesitated at the entrance, his heart pounding in his chest. The cabin looked as though it had been abandoned for decades. Dust motes floated in the weak beam of Thomas's flashlight, and the room was sparsely furnished with only remnants of what might have once been a home. In the corner, partially obscured by cobwebs and dust, lay an ancient, leather-bound book. Its cover was adorned with strange symbols and inscriptions that seemed to writhe and shift under the light. Drawn by a mix of curiosity and dread, Thomas approached the book. As he reached out to touch it, the whispers began. At first, they were faint, like the distant murmur of a breeze, but they quickly grew louder and more insistent. The whispers seemed to come from all directions, filling the cabin with a chorus of voices that resonated with deep, primal fear. Thomas opened the book, and its pages glowed with an eerie light, revealing ancient texts written in a language he could barely understand. The words spoke of a dark and malevolent spirit bound to the donkey, a spirit that could only be unleashed through fear and despair. The book described rituals and curses, hinting at a horror that went beyond human understanding. As Thomas read, the cabin reacted to the book's dark revelations. The walls seemed to pulse with an unseen force, and the shadows lengthened, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to move with a life of their own. The temperature dropped sharply, and an icy chill filled the room. The whispers grew louder, merging into a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the cabin. The cabin, once a place of forgotten memories, had transformed into a nightmarish trap. The floorboards shifted and warped, and the ceiling began to sag, as if the entire structure was collapsing inward. Thomas realized with growing horror that the cabin was not merely a relic but a prison, designed to ensnare those who uncovered its secrets. Desperate to escape, Thomas grabbed the book and stumbled toward the door. But the forest outside had become a living nightmare. The path he had followed was obscured by a swirling fog that distorted his vision and seemed to close in on him from all sides. The trees, once familiar, now appeared as twisted, monstrous figures, their branches clawing at him as he tried to navigate through the fog. Thomas's flashlight flickered and died, leaving him in near-total darkness. The whispers of the spirit grew louder, their voices echoing with relentless, malicious energy. It felt as though the forest itself was alive, its malevolent presence pressing in from all directions. In the midst of his panic, Thomas glimpsed the donkey's glowing eyes through the fog. The creature stood motionless at the edge of the clearing, its gaze now hollow and devoid of the earlier malevolence. The fog began to lift, and the oppressive atmosphere seemed to dissipate as dawn approached. With the first light of morning, Thomas stumbled out of the forest, forever changed by his harrowing experience. He emerged into the cold light of day, his mind reeling from the horrors he had witnessed. The village of Everwood remained a place of dark legends and lingering curses, its secrets waiting for the next unwary soul to uncover. Thomas never spoke of his encounter with the cursed gaze and the haunted cabin. The terror of that night stayed with him always, a haunting reminder of the dark forces lurking in the shadows. He understood that some mysteries were best left undisturbed, and that the true horror of Everwood lay not just in its dark legends, but in the chilling reality that awaited those who dared to uncover them. The forest continued to lure the unwary with its ancient curse, its malevolent presence waiting for the next soul to fall into its grasp. For Thomas, the forest remained a place of endless shadows and haunting whispers, a place where the cursed gaze of a small donkey had revealed the darkest depths of human fear. The darkness of Everwood remained a chilling testament to the fact that some secrets are too terrifying to uncover. The list of the vocabulary is in the description.